Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and every now and then we do a segment called Black, White, and Politically Incorrect with my good friend Miss Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. So before we get started, I want to ask Susan, how you doing today?
Fantastic voice. And you?
I'm doing really well, really well,
Good.
and you and I were talking about the racial climate in America, which is kind of. I mean, every 6 months it seems like it kind of hits an all-time high in terms of the tension and the kinds of conversations and so many developments have occurred since the unfortunate shooting that occurred at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Dylan Roof was arrested. There was this conversation about whether it was terrorism or not, and then there was the conversation about the Confederate flag,
Yeah.
and a few other spin-offs into this. And in fact, even the president of the United States went onto a
Oh,
radio
yeah, yeah,
show
yeah.
and used the N-word. So I guess to start from the beginning, I want to first ask you this. You just get your
Yeah.
opinions, and just so people know, I didn't ask you any of this in advance, so I'm going to be
Right.
surprised when you give me your responses. What did you think about that whole debate over whether or not this should formally be defined as terrorism or not?
Well, I'm surprised that you would describe it as the unfortunate shooting
Mm,
in South Carolina. And when I heard about this, my heart sank, as did everybody's. It's unconscionable. It's unfathomable that this kind of it's an atrocity. It's a horror. Um, just awful. Just it left everybody heartbroken, speechless and heartbroken that such a thing would happen in a house of worship. In a house of worship. I'm a person of faith, and the thought that you go to a house of worship and are gunned down. I don't even have the words. I don't even have the words. It's as bad as that. Um, was it terrorism? Well, sure, it was terrorism. I think it most certainly was, and it was a hate crime. It was obviously a racially motivated hate crime. I think the flag. How could that flag be still flying on a government building? I don't get that. I don't get that at all. Just take the flag down, for God's sake. I think that it should. I heard this morning on the news that Walmart is no longer going to be selling that flag, and Amazon's not going to be. That I think is an overstepping. I don't think that's. I don't think that's a step that's necessary. I think people who want to buy that junk are going to buy it. Just like you want to buy a swastika, you're going to find somebody who's going to sell it to you. I don't think we should outlaw the purchase of that kind of hate paraphernalia,
well, I mean, but
but certainly it doesn't
would
belong to
Walmart?
government.
Well, I didn't mean to. I want to ask you this: would Walmart sell a swastika though? They wouldn't sell a swastika, would they?
I have no idea. I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
yeah, I don't remember seeing a swastika section in Walmart
Well,
last time I was there.
well, I don't know a section. No, not a section, but I'll bet you if you go on Amazon, right? And I was shopping in the swastika section over at Walmart. No, I don't think that's it. But I bet if you went to Amazon online and looked for swastikas, I'm sure you could find them. I'm sure you could find all kinds of Nazi paraphernalia. Should we ban the sale of that stuff? I don't think so, because nor do I think we should ban the sale of. And do I understand that's actually not the Confederate flag? That's something else. The Confederate flag is something else, and it's a flag that looks different than that. This is a different kind of flag that I'm not even quite sure what this flag is, but it clearly seems to many people to be a representation of the acceptance of slavery. And that's reason enough to say, no, this doesn't belong on any government building. But no, I don't think we should be banning or restricting the sale of garbage. Do we restrict the sale of pornography? Do we restrict the sale? No. People who want to buy junk or buy hateful stuff, they're going to anyway. We need to change minds. We need to change attitudes. We need to change people's philosophies and the way they maybe see the world, but change their buying habits. I don't know. I don't know that that's the way. Well, what do you think?
I want to ask. Well, from what I understand, they're not outlawing the sale. I don't think they're saying you can't sell it anywhere. I think what they're saying is, or certain retailers are saying, we won't participate in the sale of the Confederate flag, right? But I don't think that if I opened up a website tomorrow and said, buy your Confederate flags here. I don't think the government would show up and seize my website,
No,
even though we're
but
always kind of teetering on that line a little bit. What do you think?
no, I don't think the government's going to show up and shut down your sale of Confederate flags. And in fact, I understand there's been an uptick in the sale of Confederate flags, which is not surprising, given that there are those who feel this is, who was it? Bill Kristol, who said that this was just an overreaching of political correctness to take the flags down or to restrict the sale. Um, no, I don't think that the government's going to swoop in and shut down. This is a fine line. This is really a fine line of restricting people's choice. And as much as we talk about uh, needing the necessity for people to get out of this racist, white supremacist mindset, get away from the hatred, get away from this racist mentality, I don't think you could do it by force. You can't do that by force. I think that these are changes that come about subtly, and it doesn't come about by force, by restricting somebody's freedom to buy whatever kind of garbage they want.
Well,
Do you disagree?
I would agree to a point, but disagree in a different context, or add something. I'm not gonna say it's a
Yeah,
disagreement. But I think in the short term, you're right. If you force people to do something or to change something, they're not usually gonna be happy about it.
right,
And you're kind of infringing on these freedoms and liberties that we think we have as
right,
Americans or think we should have. But I think in terms of really setting a new standard, particularly for the next generation, um, these sort of forced changes can make a difference. For example, when schools were integrated and we had desegregation, there were a lot of people who fought against that, who said you can't make me let these people into our schools, or you can't let these people, or you can't force me to let these people into our neighborhoods. But when you move forward, say 20, 30 years, these sort of forced ideals became such a standard that you know that adults 20, 30 years later didn't care as much. They weren't as angry about those things, right? Whereas they might have that grandfather who remembers the days when they could keep black kids out of the school, and he's still mad about things that happened in the 60s or 50s.
right.
But his children and grandchildren are like, what's the big deal? And I find that happens as well when you talk about issues that relate to the LGBT movement of things like little boys being allowed to use the girls' bathroom if they identify with women. Older people who remember when girls went to girls' bathrooms and boys went to boys' bathrooms, they're offended by this. They're kind of stunned by this.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
like how do you let a little boy go to the girls' bathroom? That's crazy. I don't want my little girl in the bathroom with a boy. But you find that younger people, because this is a standard that they're accustomed to, they're like, well, what's the big deal? Why are you being so old fashioned? So I
right.
think that's kind of I think expectations matter in terms of
I
comparing
do.
what the world is to what you think the world should be, or what you were accustomed to the world being before those changes were made. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, agree. No, I absolutely agree. And one of the things we did not talk about is that Donna Zill, whatever her name is, the one who's
Oh,
identifying Dolezal,
Rachel, hmm
Dolezal.
Dolazol. I've heard Dolazol, and then I've heard like Dolajol, but either way, please continue.
But the idea of, can we identify as anything we want? We could identify, look, Bruce Jenner is identifying as Caitlyn. This Dolezal is white. And I've seen her parents. It looks like she's white to me, but she's identifying as black. Think of the number of things that we identify as that simply have no basis in fact. How often we lie about our age, how often we color our hair, how often we, do any number of things to put ourselves forward as something that we're not. So I wonder, well, how did you feel about that woman identifying as black? I mean, were you resentful of that? Did you think there was a
Um, I wasn't personally resentful.
okay?
I know a lot of black people who were, mostly black women. I really meant to tell someone at Your Black World to do a survey, because if if they were to do a survey, I'd be willing to bet you that 80% of black women were offended by what she did, and maybe about 50% of black men. And I don't know why there was the gender difference. I guess because she was pretending to be a black woman, and there were so many women who just said, "How dare you, pretend to be like me?" And what was so interesting to me was in all the conversation that occurred. I mean, there was just incessant debate about Dolezal all week long, and a lot of people were mad at me because because I was more moderate than people wanted me to be.
Yeah,
Sometimes people they force you into this corner where they want you to be extreme about something, and I'll say no, I'm not going to be extreme just because you think it's cool to be extreme about this. I'm going to tell you what I think. So in this case, I had to stand my ground and say, please, you have not yet been able to convince me how this woman hurt the black community by perpetrating her fraud. We know it was a fraud, right? But I couldn't see in her track record where she'd hurt anybody. What I saw was a woman who, maybe because of things that happened in her childhood, I believe she was sexually abused. In fact, I think she talked about that. Um, and she grew up around, so she had black kids in the house. I think somehow, for some reason, she just decided, I just want to be a black girl. And she went to Howard University. Normal white people don't want to go to Howard.
oh, is that
She
right?
she became the head of the NAACP. She's taught about Black history, Black culture. I said, okay, so she really, really has a fascination with being black. I wasn't mad about it. Um, I would almost compare it to people I've known who said, I really have a lot of respect for Jewish culture. I want to be Jewish. I want to convert. I want to be part. And I don't know. I'm not Jewish, but I'm wondering. I'd be surprised if there was resistance, if as long as the person showed that they were authentic about it. But I think
Right.
where people are catching Rachel Dolezal is the fact that they keep pointing out the fact that she was a fraud, and it's interesting because I also said to people, I said, you're arguing your point. I think because you have this emotional attachment to the idea that Rachel is a bad person, so you're taking every little thing and you're flipping that into yet another piece of evidence that she's this horrible human being. I said, but really, I still haven't heard anybody explain to me exactly why she differs from Bruce Jenner.
Right.
I can, and the only thing I heard where, the closest thing I heard to a legitimate argument on this issue was when somebody said, the difference is that Rachel lied for many, many years and pretended to be a black woman and misled people, and Bruce didn't lie. Bruce was a man his whole life, etc. But I said, no, actually, Bruce, if you listen to him talk about his experience, you could say that he was being fraudulent because he was wearing women's underwear underneath his male clothing. So, what Rachel was pretending to be black when she was really white, whereas, Bruce was really a man, but deep down inside he was, he wanted to be a woman, I guess. So, both of them, I think, somehow felt that either who they truly were, who they felt like they were, or who they actually were, physically, was not acceptable to society. So they had to
Right.
perpetrate this fraud for many, many years. That's my analysis of it. So I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not mad at Rachel. I'm just not mad. I mean, I don't. I mean, she shows that she cares about black people. She's fought on issues that support the black community. I just have a hard time hating her for it.
Well, I think we got to stop hating everybody for everything. And people who hate Bruce Jenner for identifying as female, people who hate Rachel for we got to stop hating, first of all. But I think, honestly, I wonder, can we identify as anything we want to be? And what's the harm in doing so? What's the harm
I was
in
thinking about
identifying?
becoming a white woman tomorrow. So
Really?
yeah, yeah. Is there a
You don't
surgery
have
I
the
can
good
get?
hair. You have the good hair,
I
Bruce.
don't
You
have.
don't have,
Yeah, the hair extensions would have to be pretty good for me to pull it off. You think?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. But no, I think if you want to identify as, as a woman, I guess who does it hurt? I don't know that it hurts anyone. Or if you want to identify as white when you're black or black when you're white. I mean, yeah, the idea of identifying as white, people have been passing. I mean, this is not a new thing, right? Light skinned black people have been passing as white or identifying as white even when they're black.
Hmm.
So, this whole uh, race race identification transference is not new, but it's confusing. I think it's confusing for everybody, and I think we all have to stop hating. Stop hating on each other. If what somebody chooses to be or chooses to do doesn't harm you or harm anybody, I think we all have to take a deep breath and just say, you know what, you have one life to live. There used
Yeah,
to be a commercial, you're too young to remember it, but there used to be a commercial on TV for Clairol back in the 60s, and I remember this. And the line was, if I have only one life to live, let me live it as a blonde.
well,
There it is. Yeah, you have only one life to live. Live it as a woman, live it as a black person, live it as a Jew, live it as, who is it to tell you how you are to live your own life? As long as you're not hurting anybody else, I don't really have a problem with it.
yeah, I think I agree with you, and you know, going back to the Dolezal thing. I don't know if you heard the story about Bird. I think that's her name. Verda Bird is a story that came out a little bit after the Dolezal story, and this was interesting because Verda was born a white woman, but her father left her mother died, and so she was adopted by a wealthy black family, and they never told her that she was white. They just made her believe she was a light skinned black woman. So she lives.
There was a movie about this, right? There was a documentary about this
I didn't
on
know.
HBO.
I didn't know there's a
I think
documentary.
so. I think
Really?
so. Go ahead.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
this.
Well, she lived 70 years as a black woman, and then found out she was white when she studied her family history, and I found it so interesting because, um, you know, even though she found out she was white, Bird insisted that she said, "Look, I'm a black woman, and that's what I'm going to be until until I'm gone." And but what was also interesting was she said that she has no sympathy for Rachel Dolezal. She said, "No, she's a fraud. She's a liar." And and again, I understand. Okay, you thought you were black for many years because that's what you had been told. So you didn't deliberately lie.
Well, that's different.
And
Yeah,
Rachel
that's
Rachel
a little
deliberately lied.
different.
But I said to myself, I said, but now that you know that you're white, and you're telling people that you're black, does that make you fraudulent or what? Does that make you true to yourself? What does it make you?
Well,
So I guess my point with Rachel and is you do kind of wish she hadn't lied. I mean, you can't defend someone lying per se, but at the same time, um, when you confront someone about lying, sometimes you have to ask, well, did I really have a right to ask you your business in the first place? Like
mhm.
if I say, hey Susan, you know, tell me something about your sex life or whatever, right? And then let's say you just give me an answer just to make me go away, and then I find out something different. I say, well, you lied to me. Well, you probably say, well, Boyce, it was none of your business in the first place,
To begin
right?
with.
Right, and so so when you think about this sort of transformation thing, gender transformation, racial transformation, whatever, there are lines that people aren't even really supposed to cross. Like I'm not supposed to go up to Caitlin and on a busy street and say, "Do you still have your penis, or did you get it replaced?" That's not, and then
It's
not only
not
do I not have a
appropriate.
right to ask that question, but I don't have a right to get offended if he lies to me. You know?
Let me correct you. You absolutely have the right to ask the question, but you shouldn't. It's inappropriate.
Right,
There's nothing that prevents you. If you were to ask me a personal question about my sex life or anything else, it's not that I would lie to you. I would say to you, that's not your business, and I won't respond to you.
mm,
So the line between representing yourself falsely, look, if I colored my hair blonde and told you I was a natural blonde, do you have a problem with that? Don't have a problem with that. Frankly, what business is it of yours? It's not any of your business. If I choose to, I have one life and I want to live it as a blonde, that's my business. Now, where I would have a problem is if Rachel Dolezal or whoever else was passing or trying to pass themselves off as being minority to reap certain benefits that are reserved for minorities, whether it's college admission or some, EEOC, equal employment thing. If she was using that to gain an advantage that was reserved for a protected group, that would be troubling to me.
and I think that is a good point, and that was something I thought about a lot. Um, and what's interesting is that when you look at the data, actually, the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are not black people. it's white women. So, being a white woman can and maybe you can help me. You're in HR, but from what I understand, being a woman of any race can go a long way when it comes to benefiting from affirmative action. You don't have to change your race to get those benefits. Help me out with
Well,
that.
there was a time that being a woman would have been a good thing, but now there are as many women in business as there are men, so that's not it. Women are better educated than men at this point, or many women, certainly in the African American community. Black women are outperforming black men both professionally and educationally, so that's not it. From a job perspective, I don't think women have any kind of advantage anymore. If they have any advantage, it's only that women are paid less, so they're just a more desirable hire because they're cheaper to buy, basically, for an employer. But I don't think that there's an advantage to being a woman in business anymore. I don't know that there ever was, quite frankly. Maybe there was a short period of time when businesses were eager to show that they, have women in managerial roles, but I think at this point, there are so many women in managerial roles, maybe not in the very top spots, but there are so many women in managerial roles that I'm hard pressed to say, as an HR babe, I'm hard pressed to say that it's an advantage at this point.
Well, as a self-professed HR babe, you are the expert on this. I don't know. I haven't even worked for another person for many years now. I guess almost 4 or 5 years. I've been on my own ship for a while, and it's been pretty awesome. I'm
Yeah,
sick.
well, and you would never benefit from benefits afforded to white women. That's just, I mean, they would see through you like that, babe, like that.
Okay, so my goal of becoming a white woman is now has now been squashed. No, no more
Yeah, I
dream.
think
Well, you know what? I've been a black man for a while now, and I've enjoyed it. So I think I'm going to stick with that.
good.
And I'm just so people, in case people take me too seriously, I'm really joking. I don't want to be a white woman, so don't go spreading the rumors. You'd be amazed at the rumors people spread.
Yeah.
I've had people say that I'm getting paid by the government to talk to black people, and that what else did someone say? I think someone actually accused me of being paid by the Jews. I thought that was
Oh,
interesting.
really?
Yeah, they made a video about it. They said that I was being paid by the Jews
Oh,
to
God.
exploit and manipulate black people, which I thought was interesting. I've had people. Here's another good one. I've had people. I had a guy. One of my friends said that she worked with me, or she told an uncle that she worked with me, and he said, "Oh yeah, I know Dr. Boyce Watkins. He's at Syracuse. He screws all the white women on that campus."
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I thought that was so funny because I
Oh, my
said I
God.
said really he said that, and she said yeah, I laughed because anybody who knows you know that that's not what you do, but because it's funny because I've never slept with a white woman ever, and I
Just information, boys. TMI, baby. TMI.
TMI. But you know what? I'll tell you the truth. No. The reason I'm getting to this though is, yeah, you're right. It was TMI. But here's why I'm getting to this. I did actually like a white girl. I was attracted to her when I was 15, and that was the only time I ever tried to pursue a white girl. And I didn't know anything about girls. I was so scared of girls. I was scared of girls till I was about 28. I mean, that's what happened. See, that's where being taught certain things as a man is very important because no one really taught me how to talk to girls. So I would just my hands would sweat. I'd be so nervous. And so anyway, so I started talking to this little white girl, and and she was on the track team with me, and her dad used to come to the track meets, and her dad was really nice to me, when I was just an athlete, not the black kid trying to date his daughter. So we talked to each other. I gave her a little kiss on the cheek, and everything was nice, um, and then she just stopped talking to me. She stopped taking my
Oh,
call. Every time I called her, she wasn't
oh,
home.
oh,
When I passed her notes in class, she wouldn't want to talk to me after class. It was really hurtful. And I finally asked her what was going on, and it was because her father told her that
oh,
I don't want you talking to a black kid, and
oh.
that was one of my first and really most painful exposures to
Of
racism
course.
because at
Of
that
course.
time I just didn't understand it. I was
Right.
like
You're a kid.
I was
Right.
like, what's wrong with me? And I'll tell you that experience traumatized me so bad that I said I'm not doing that again ever.
Ever
I'm
again.
not interested. And then now it's more so in terms of what I would be attracted to. I would be more attracted to black women just because I think they're gorgeous, and I support the black family, and I figure if you've got a lot of fish in the sea, you can that you could potentially date or whatever it is you want to do. I think as a black man, I prefer to stay in the black family, right? So it's no offense to white women or anyone else or Asian or anything else. It's just to say I love my own people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I
Absolutely.
can tell you that story. I think about that. I don't even tell that story that much because every time I
But you
think
remember it. You
every
remember it
every
vividly.
every time I bring it up, it's like it brings a little knot in my
Hurts
stomach.
all over again.
Yeah, and and
So,
you know what? It's like it's a knot in my stomach, but it's more so like a nervous like trepidation. It's not like this sort of overbearing pain. That's not it. It's just more like holy shit, oh my god, I can't believe that happened. You know what I mean? Like I think that's what it is.
yeah.
Because now I'm a grown man. I'm much stronger, so I can withstand racism. I've seen it all. But I just think about that 15-year-old kid. He didn't know anything about racism, and this happened, and you know what else happened? Here's the other funny thing, and I can't give too much information about what my dad said, but I remember when I told my father what happened. I mean, he was angry. He
Oh,
was really
I'm
mad,
sure.
and he said,
I'm sure.
and his reaction at that time. Remember, he was young though. He was like maybe 30, so he was a young guy, or not 30, maybe he was 33, 34. And he said, see, that's why I always tell you, you reject them before they reject you, before they have you
Yeah,
thinking that you're not as good as they are, and now I look back on that. I think his reaction was built on the fact that that he'd gone through that kind of thing, and
probably.
so it's kind of sad how kind of one type of animosity piles onto the other. So well, anyway, but so me and my father are both matured since that time, but I think that those experiences, those
They
are some
stay
of the
with
things. Those are some of the things you go through when you're black that introduce you to racism that you don't understand. Because during those teenage years, when you're a growing man, as you start to realize how society views you as a black male. Before that, maybe when I was 12, you couldn't have told me I was much different from my white friends. But
you. Right.
after about 16, oh, I knew. I
Yeah.
knew that there was a
Totally knew
difference.
there was a
Yeah.
difference. Right.
So anyway, I didn't mean to go on the tangent with that crazy story,
No, that's okay.
but I think it would add to the conversation since we talk about racial issues, and
All
I
the
love
time.
you so much. So
And I love you so much.
yes,
So we will talk again soon. I will look forward to it.
yes, we will.
I hope all of your viewers or all of our viewers are well and happy. And uh, keep in mind, we don't hate. Post something nice on the.
You know they're not going to be nice. You just that's a lost cause. But we
I
can
know
ask. We can
even
ask.
viewers are going to be nice. They're going to be nice.
Yeah,
They're going to
okay.
be nice.
Well,
I
everybody,
have
please be nice. Even if you disagree, please just make
be
your
respectful
comment
in your
with a
disagreements.
tone of maturity and some kind of openness and understanding. That's it. You don't have to
Exactly.
agree with someone,
Exactly.
but I think it is always beneficial as a mental exercise, an emotional exercise, to try to empathize with those who disagree with you. If you can do that, then you're going to be a better person in the end. So
And a
that's
happier person. And a
it,
happier person.
that's true. Yeah, don't walk around with all this hate in your heart. That ain't no fun. All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan. It was great
Always a
talking to you.
pleasure.
Absolutely. And everybody, this is Miss Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. She wrote a great book called Marry Smart. I think you should read this book. This book has the kind of information I would share with my daughters in a second. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and just so you know, we're starting our Black Wealth Boot Camp in July. You can find out more about it at boycewatkins.com. Please take a look. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. I am gone. Peace.